represent him, Your Honor.
Okay, you're not representing her.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, we called a case of 22-239. Margaret Bruno, is it Lucia?
This is who you're calling right here, Your Honor.
Yeah.
Just so we're clear, I'm representing the, authorized representative for the legal fiction. And I cannot cross the bar if you
It's honestly baffling that someone who speaks with such confidence still can't pass the bar exam. One has to wonder whether it's a lack of legal understanding rather than intelligence itself that keeps getting in the way. What makes this video particularly ironic is her repeated complaint that she couldn't properly hear during her first hearing, and that the judge supposedly ignored her claimed disability. Yet, in the same breath, she deliberately positions herself as far from the judge as possible, effectively creating the very problem she's protesting. That contradiction alone undermines her credibility and suggests a refusal to take responsibility for her own actions. This sovereign citizen seems far more interested in playing the victim than in behaving logically or cooperatively. In the end, her conduct shows less dysfunction in the system and more dysfunction in her approach to reality itself.
Yeah, it's not as sophisticated as my hearing aids, but I can hear you this time.
All right.
All right, I just want to be clear that when I was here for the arraignment, first off, I never had a first appearance. Within 24 hours, I was incarcerated for 13 days without a first appearance. Bond was set.
And that's true because you wouldn't sign the documents at the jail. Until you sign documents at the jail, you don't.
Where is that written that you have to sign anything? Because I couldn't find it. It just simply says within 24 hours I would go before a judge. I had
you weren't properly booked, so that's the way that was. But I'm not going to argue with your point. But go ahead.
Okay, well, I just want to get it on the record that I am here on a special appearance, and I'm just the authorized representative for this birth certificate. It has been federally authenticated. If you want to take a look at it, it has been certified by the state and federally authenticated. I am the owner of this SQQV.
This judge is truly impressive because, while he allows her to run through her well-rehearsed script, he never once legitimizes the nonsense behind it. He listens patiently but makes it clear that the courtroom is not a stage for sovereign citizen fantasies. The moment she tries to argue that she is American but not an American citizen, and therefore exempt from the law, he shuts it down without hesitation. His approach shows a perfect balance of professionalism and authority, letting her speak while refusing to indulge the delusion. In doing so, he reinforces a simple truth: personal beliefs do not override legal reality.
Under the public law,
Okay.
and I have a right to pass through service.
All right. So I take it you're representing yourself today.
No, I am presenting myself.
Okay. So you're not going to enter a plea today or work out negotiations or anything?
I'm not making any plea whatsoever. I have not consented to contract with this court in any way.
Okay.
I'm an American state national. I'm not a sovereign citizen. That was a hate crime under which I was arrested, and the arresting officer has since quit his job with the Jasper Police Department.
All right. Well, State, we can.
I have a file here that I have one prepared for both the prosecutor and for you, Judge, if you'd like to take a look and go along with me on what I'd like to bring before the court. My goal is that this case get dismissed with prejudice before I walk out today.
Well, that's not going to happen.
Pow!
All right. Well, here's what we're going to do today. I'll look this over for you.
This file is not completed. Let me explain. All the highlighted areas, I met with the clerk of court, Greg Godwin, and the areas that were in yellow here, I expected that he would be able to provide the information for me to complete these documents. I am not able to mail them until I can get them completed. He suggested that I talk with, is it John Durham, or who is it, Durant? Am I getting that correct, Tabitha?
That's Mr. Durrett, the state attorney.
Durrett, okay.
Mm-hmm.
He suggests that I should talk with him as far as getting this information completed. He said he wasn't able to complete the information, otherwise I can hire somebody to get this information for me. So if this case is not going to be submitted, what the first letter in here is a fair notice and warning letter, and it speaks to what the issues are here. First off, it was a false arrest because I do have a right to travel. No, and then also there is no contract. The application for a driver's license does not tell anybody that you are trading a God-given.
If this is truly a so-called God-given right, then perhaps you could point to the exact verse in the Bible where God explicitly grants permission to drive a Ford Pinto to bingo night without a license. It's always fascinating how divine authority suddenly appears whenever basic legal responsibilities are questioned. The problem is that no scripture supports the idea that traffic laws are optional or that personal convenience overrides public safety. Invoking God to avoid licensing requirements doesn't strengthen the argument. It exposes how weak it really is. Faith may guide moral choices, but it doesn't replace the law or rewrite reality.
He's an accuser, and there's nobody here that was harmed. Deprivation of due process, Your Honor. You denied me a first appearance, and I have not heard the charges because I am hard of hearing. I brought that to the attention of the court at the arraignment, and your comment was simply, I'm talking as loud as I can. Well, that doesn't do any good for somebody who has a disability, and you have a responsibility to me under the Americans' Disability.
She insists that she doesn't want to hear any explanations, repeatedly claiming that her disability prevents her from hearing anything being said. Yet, at the same time, she deliberately refuses to stand at the podium, which is barely 10 feet closer to the judge and clearly designed for communication. That choice alone contradicts her complaint and weakens her credibility. If being heard and understanding the proceedings were truly her priority, she would take the simplest step available to improve the situation. Instead, her actions suggest that the claim is less about accommodation and more about avoiding accountability. You can't demand consideration while actively refusing reasonable solutions.
So up until, I still haven't really heard the charges. You know, when it started out, I was slammed with 7 felony charges. Had a violation of my Fourth Amendment rights because they did a search and seizure of my vehicle. They tossed my car completely. He claimed he found the phone in my car. He didn't. He took it out of my hand after shoving my arm. That was assault and battery. And then when I got into the police vehicle, my keys were in my pocket. He took them out of my pocket. All right, that again is assault and battery, and also could be...
Wait, what do you mean the officer pulled the keys from your pocket illegally? Oh, you mean that pocket you're suddenly acknowledging now. It's interesting how the details become clear only when the argument starts falling apart. A moment ago, the pocket didn't exist. Now it's central to the complaint. This kind of selective memory doesn't strengthen the claim. It exposes the inconsistency. When the story keeps changing, the credibility disappears with it.
To sit in jail for 8 days with felony charges hanging over my head, of which you put a $38,000 bond on me without my participation. Again, that was a violation or deprivation of due process. The felony charges were bogus. I'm an international notarial witness for the United States of America, unincorporated. I had those, driver's license on my phone and birth certificates because I do remote notarization for people. I had a right to have that. I had it by permission of the people that sent it to me. The prosecutor, Dana Brady Giddens, she failed to act for 6 days. On July 1st, Travis transferred it from the felony side over to misdemeanors. She sat on it for 6 days. I sat in jail for 13 days, not even knowing what was going on. And it wasn't until after I got out of jail and I called her, and while I was on the phone, she goes, "Oh, here it is." She asked me what my name was, and she goes, "Oh, here it is," and she opened it while I was on the phone. So Travis sat on it for 7 days. Whatever happened to due process? Don't they have a responsibility to act timely? Because I know I do. I was kidnapped and taken to a prisoner of war camp. I had no choice in this, and I'm an American. I'm an American state citizen. I stand above this court. I stand above this for-profit corporation. First time that I saw you, sir, was 44 days after my arrest. And again, my Americans with Disability Act rights were violated in that you made no accommodation at all for my not being able to hear you. So as far as I know, I never did put in a plea. I have not pled in any way whatsoever. I have not consented. I have signed absolutely nothing. I signed no citations. I have had communication with Tabitha and Dana. We have been writing back and forth on our 72 rule of response, and I can't get answers out of them. They keep telling, I ask for documentation, and all I get is no documents responsive, no documents responsive, over and over again. I ask her for her oath of office on Florida letterhead, nothing. I get a scrap of paper. I ask her for a signed contract on my side, I get a citation that's not signed. The citation wasn't even signed by the arresting officer, it's by somebody else, and it has comments in it that says
He is under absolutely no obligation to stand there and watch you embarrass yourself, especially when the sound of you crunching nonsense is impossible to ignore. At that point, the problem isn't a lack of attention, it's the lack of substance. Noise doesn't equal an argument, and volume doesn't replace logic. When every word sounds hollow, there's nothing left to engage with. Sometimes walking away is simply the most reasonable response.
I didn't sign anything. I have not contracted with this court. I haven't contracted at all. And why? Because I don't need to. I'm not under these statutes, rules, regulations, codes, ordinances, mandates, and all the rest. I tried to explain that to the public defender here that you assigned to talk to me. And then basically everything out of his mouth came out right out of this hate crime document called Law Enforcement Guide to Sovereign Citizens. I'm not a Moor. I'm not a Waukesha nation. I'm an American state citizen. Okay. To call somebody a sovereign citizen is slander. To put it in writing is libel. Sovereign is a king, somebody who is governing, self-governing. Citizen is somebody who works for another. It's an oxymoron.
You got the moron part right.
I'm a private living woman. My responsibility is to balance the accounts of the public, the public all caps name, and to keep the public charitable trust in balance. Roosevelt put us on an all debit system, and these credits have been stolen from the people. And all I'm trying to do is my responsibility here. So I'm planning to subrogate this. If you look at the second document, or maybe you already have, and you've seen the list of people I will send it to, Governor DeSantis has been involved in my case. I have a letter here that was sent to him. If you would like to see that, let's see, maybe it's in one of the other files. Anyway, he has been involved in this as well, because he is also part of the problem here, in that he is not assisting the Americans within this state to be safe from the harm that is being caused by this system, by the law enforcement officers and deputies who are not educated.
That's where you're mistaken, because police officers, judges, politicians, and even ordinary citizens are becoming increasingly aware of these tactics. Whether you label yourselves sovereign citizens or, in this case, an American state, the script is no longer new or convincing. The arguments have been heard before and consistently rejected. Awareness has grown, patience has worn thin, and accountability is catching up. Rebranding the idea doesn't change the reality behind it.
The police chief and the sheriff on 2 different occasions, they have my fee schedule as to what I'll be charging when this is all over, and I have to come back and have my rights restored and my property restored. My car was towed from in front of the police station. That's where I was when all this happened. I was in talking to Chief Rickerson. I went in and I noticed both the chief and the sheriff, the clerk of court, and the property appraiser when I got here back in March, that I was an American state citizen and I'm not a U.S. citizen. They were both noticed. They've both been noticed twice. And along with that was the fee schedule of what I charge when my rights are violated.
Wow! The land of make-believe!
I was talking with the police chief for the 4th time. We have sat down and had 4 conversations on how we educate the officers to know the difference so people are not harmed on the side of the road. I wasn't even on the side of the road. I was parked in front of the police station when all this went down. I wasn't even in my car. This officer got in my face back in April, and he stood there. I was meeting with the police chief, Chief Rickerson. At that time, he was an interim police chief. And this officer barged into our discussion and got in my face and started spitting on me with his saliva. He was like this close to me, yelling at me, telling me, I'm a police officer for 25 years and I've dealt with plenty of people like you. And he went on and on and on, okay?
Sorry, Karen, but you clearly don't understand your rights as well as you think, and you're not nearly as exceptional as you imagine. This goes back to the self-identity of so-called American state nationals, whose arguments mirror sovereign citizen rhetoric almost word for word. They refuse to accept the comparison because it clashes with the image they've built of themselves. Yet the reality is simple. The labels may differ, but the logic and the failure remains the same. If that clip of her calling herself an American state national were played on its own, most viewers would immediately recognize it as classic sovereign citizen behavior.
You could not get through the 2020 election and not know that there's something seriously wrong with this country. And I have seen this coming for many, many years. I studied it with my husband. My husband passed back in 2010.
That was a close call by any standard, the kind of situation where things could have gone very wrong very fast. One small decision made the difference between consequences and catastrophe. Looking back, it's obvious how narrowly disaster was avoided. Moments like that remind you how fragile outcomes can be. Sometimes luck steps in before reality hits.
Article that the Pope had relinquished our Social Security accounts to the U.S. Treasury, and I knew something had changed, something was up, and I went looking. And when I went looking, I found at least 20 organizations trying to help people come out of slavery, come out of this U.S.
For just $49.99, they promise you secret life hacks that will supposedly keep you out of jail, erase your taxes, and hand you cars and houses for free. It always sounds tempting until you stop and think about it for more than 5 seconds. The truth is, it's a scam from start to finish, run by people selling false hope to the desperate. They take your money, recycle the same failed script, and disappear when reality catches up. If you weren't so determined to believe you're right, you'd hear it out loud and realize how absurd it actually sounds.
The administrative arm to the Pope, which is the financial arm, and to Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia, which is the military arm of the one world government. Well, I don't go with that because I serve a king. I serve the Almighty King. That is who I am. I am a child of the King. I'm not a U.S. citizen. I'm a child of the King, and I have rights that were given to me, sovereign rights given to me by my Creator. And I live by the Bible. I don't live by any kind of religion, sir. I read the Bible cover to cover, and I do what it.
I'm not especially religious anymore, but there's a passage of scripture that applies perfectly here. Romans 13 reminds believers to respect governing authorities, stating that authority exists by God's permission and that resisting it brings consequences. Leaders, it explains, are meant to restrain wrongdoing, not punish those who act responsibly. If someone truly claims to follow God, ignoring the law is a direct contradiction of that belief. In simple terms, practice what you preach and follow the rules, especially if you're choosing to drive a car.
I prefer to call him by his Hebrew name. The 2 commandments, to love God above all things and to love your neighbor as yourself, I live by that. But that's a summary of the 10 commandments that are in the Old Testament, Exodus 20. And the first 5 commandments are how you love your Creator. And the second 5 commandments is how you love your neighbor. And I live by that, sir. And this officer had to break several of those commandments to put me into this system. He had to lie, and he had to steal my property. And if this is the system that this government or this for-profit corporation is trying to force on the people, then you guys should all be ashamed of yourself. I am asking, I'm not asking, I am demanding. See, a sovereign does not motion the court. A sovereign demands. I am demanding that this case be dismissed with prejudice because I'm going down for the count. I'll take whatever punishment you give me. And I think my 13 days in jail without signing anything, just for comfort, should give you an idea of the fact that I finish what I start.
We know you always finish whatever you start, and the empty paint cans sitting at the breakfast table this morning make that painfully clear. Nothing says dedication like leaving the evidence out in plain sight. It's almost impressive how consistently the pattern repeats itself. Completion isn't the issue here, judgment is. Some habits explain far more than words ever could.
It was quite a surprise. I wasn't prepared for it. If it hadn't been that I took a couple in who were homeless, I probably would have ended up going home to a dead dog in a house full of crap. But that gentleman, the people that I took in who were homeless, called my girlfriend and said she didn't come home last night. Well, my girlfriend knew that I was on my way to the post office in Live Oak, and she knew I was going to stop by and talk to the sheriff. So first call she made was to the Suwannee County Jail. Second call was to the Hamilton County Jail, and she found me. I was sitting in jail. I've never been in trouble with the law before. Do you know what it's like for a 73-year-old woman to have to stand there and take her underwear?
I understand the situation well enough. I've been through gym class, played organized sports, and served in the military, so modesty isn't some foreign concept to me. Standing exposed in front of strangers is sometimes an unavoidable consequence of certain choices. That's exactly the point. Actions come with outcomes, whether you like them or not. If you can't handle the consequences of breaking the law, the simplest solution is not to break it. Complaining and posturing clearly isn't working, and it's long past time to choose a better approach.